And you can't hear it, but it said recording in progress.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we won't be able to hear it.
We will on here, but right now, no one should be saying anything other than Tina.
Okay, so we will call the meeting to order at 6:33. And I will hand it over to Design Lab to start.
Excellent. Are we gonna, can we get a
Oh.
presentation on screen or no?
We can, but you're gonna have to give me a second.
All right. So, talk casually amongst yourselves. I'll go through the agenda once we can share it on screen with everybody, but it's a big milestone. We're reviewing our design development. Yeah, and our estimate. PD phase of the process. It's kind of big picture of where we are, but let's wait to get this queued up and then we'll go through it in more detail.
Yes, so you can't see it. I'm sharing the screen, but you can't see it, so. It's gonna take a minute. That happened to me last night downstairs too.
What else? Years ago. That's working, so. Yeah. So that's one. Okay.
So Lisa, for the minutes, Andrew and Morgan are online while this comes up.
Not even, I guess you got straight.
If not, we'll have to run it without the camera. At least they'll see the presentation, they'll hear us, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's great. But it's just,
How are you doing?
How's your son?
Whiny, but
Feeling
fine.
okay?
Well, he's sick, but not super.
Oh,
Just in case the going gets rough.
Okay,
No,
let me just pause this for a moment so I can, I'm gonna stop that. Okay, it's here. Okay, now. let's go back to this.
I was gonna say, I think this rain is just. Doesn't even feel like it's the middle of summer. Tina or Denise, did you hear from John?
No, I just realized he's not here.
I'll shoot him a text.
Unless he got stuck in the storms.
Oh.
I hear the. elevators out here now.
there he is. We could have doubled. It only took us 10 minutes to realize you weren't here. so.
We usually present at the end.
Well, in fairness, we talk so much now, it's like. Just, I was assuming you're around. Okay, we should be all set with the camera and the sound and the presentation. So you have the clicker.
Yeah.
It's not working.
It's going, yep,
Get used to the delay.
thank you. Okay, well, here we are. Good evening, everybody. Looks like we're up and running. People are online, which is great. So this evening, yep, gotta get used to that delay. Longer than I thought. Come on. Where's our agenda here?
Oh, edit. Oops. Now we.
All right. Oh, too far.
Yeah.
You gotta point the
It'll take a
clicker at
second.
Denise.
And then-
No, it's not what I'm looking at. Wait, it's gonna go back to someone that wants too many. Don't hit anything.
Okay.
Okay, so now give it a second.
Yes. So this evening, we will be going over a number of things, but as I mentioned, we're sort of in transition here from our design development phase into our construction documentation phase. We'll go over the schedule here in a sec. But we are intending to review a summary of that design development package that has been estimated, as well as some updates. We've broken that out into exterior and interior. And then once we go through that, we'll be going through the design development estimate summary. There has been an increase in cost, a not insignificant increase in cost. So we have to manage that. So as you see on screen, we will be discussing value management strategies in reaction to that cost increase. The good news is that there's time in the process to do so, but of course the bad news is that we have to go through that process and that there is an increase in cost that we need to manage. We then want to talk a few minutes about the building systems. That all goes hand in hand with the cost increase that we'll be describing here. But we do have more information to share as it relates to the gas or the supplemental heat in either the gas source or the electric source and the cost associated with that. And then we also have some information on a transformer that we need to share that will be required for the project, which is another challenge that we're working through. And then leave some time at the end to talk about next steps. So I know you can't read all of the text there, but this has kind of been our roadmap. And as you can see where that orange line is, the vertical line just at the end of June here, we're shifting gears into construction documents, which we have through September with a preparation for a bid package following that. So here's a bit more of a detailed view of what we're up to and what we have been up to. So we just worked through that 3-week estimating period coming off of design development. Last Thursday, we had a reconciliation meeting. So the big difference in our process now is we have 2 cost estimators. We have the cost estimator that is part of the design team that did the SD estimate with us. But then John, representing the owner, the town has hired a third-party estimator. So now we have kind of 2 estimator sets of eyes looking at the project, and we went through the reconciliation process last Thursday to get all of them aligned on the estimated costs. We also last week had a meeting with the abutters, property owners. Didn't get a huge showing, just a very nice couple from across Library Hill Road joined us in the library, but that meeting, it was broadcasted to a larger group of abutters. We only had a couple show up, but that was in preparation for our ZBA meeting that should say July 10th, not June 10th, but that's in a couple weeks, in a couple Mondays. We're going to be going in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I'll talk about more here in a minute. We are proposing an additional workshop to our CD process. That's workshop 6.1 that you see up there. We're proposing that for Wednesday, July 12th. And that is largely in response to this budget issue that we have to work through. Workshop 7 should already be on everybody's calendars. That's been on the books for a while. We're going to be going back to the town departments to kind of review where we're at before we issue our last set of drawings for estimate August 11th. So then we'll go through one more estimating period to set us up for the final push of CDs. So that's our process in a nutshell, and we'll kind of revisit this at the end of the meeting to talk about it in a little bit more detail. Just a quick summary of the ZBA application process, or package, I should say, that we pulled together. We submitted it about 2 weeks ago in preparation for this July 10th meeting. And the big takeaways are that we're applying for both a special permit because the current use, the current site and building are non-conforming to the zoning type of use. It's zoned as a residential part of town, and obviously it's not a residential building. And the existing footprint of the building, which you see in those red dash lines, is not conforming with the setback requirements of the residential zoning district. So that's one part of what we're putting in front of the ZBA. And then the second part is that the addition that we're proposing is also non-conforming to setback requirements. So we need to seek a variance. So what you see on screen, you can obviously see the sort of irregular shape of our site. The green lines indicate the setback requirements. One of the tricky things about the site is that we're on 3 roads, so there's 3 front yards, which have greater setbacks. And then the rear or side yard, I should say, is kind of on the top there. And then that bit in the middle that's kind of crosshatched, that's like the actual buildable area of the site per code or for the zoning requirements. The red outline is what's there now, and the blue line is what we're proposing. So this is one drawing amongst a handful of others that we provided to the ZBA as part of our application, and then we'll be reviewing all of that with them on the 10th. And the expectation is that, you know, we will be refining the documents in the application based on that hearing and any feedback that we receive from them, and also our finessing of the footprint that is still happening, and then we'll be submitting a final package for their review and approval. The abutters meeting with the folks that did attend went pretty well. They were very, I think it's fair to say, just sort of complimentary of the process and where we're headed, and welcome. We're appreciative of the invite to be part, you know, to have a specific meeting on their behalf. So that was encouraging, but then again, they were just a couple folks of many that were invited. So unclear if other people will share those opinions or if they'll come and express them at the 10th, but it is open to the public, and abutters have been informed, and that may be something that we need to react to. So from there, I'll talk through a few slides to sort of set up the exterior summary and updates, and then Audrey will sort of walk through that in more detail, and Andrew's going to take us through the interior summary. And then I'll come back and sort of talk about where we are from a cost perspective. So this should look pretty familiar, just sort of an overall summary of the site and the first level design. This is exactly from the design development last workshop we had with you. Nothing of major, nothing of change here. We did, just for everybody's reference, there's a whole other side of our process where we're developing drawings for estimating and for the CD package ultimately and going to bid. This is a reflection of what those look like, but we did start to incorporate some modest updates that we'll talk about here in more detail. Of course, you've seen this slide dozens of times, it probably feels like at this point, but it's always important to remember what it is we're working with and where we've been. And this is a summary of where we landed at DD in our last workshop 5. And this is what's reflected in the DD drawings that I just showed that were estimated. So one thing that we want to talk about tonight is, you know, we've reflected on this a lot internally, and we're very excited about where we landed and the sort of combination of stone and masonry and the form of the roof. But we've talked a lot about internally the tone of the brick as it relates to Randall's brick, which I'll just kind of click back. But you know, Randall has a very specific red tone brick itself, and we're very conscientious of that. And we're very want to be very strategic in that we don't want our proposed brick to feel too close to that red brick and perhaps, you know, clash with it in a way that wouldn't be appealing, or potentially even worst case scenario look like a bad match, right? We're not going to be able to match that brick in any way, and we want our brick to be distinct from that. So we are proposing tonight a recommendation. It's a slight departure from where we were, but that's to consider a lighter toned gray brick as a distinct difference from the red. We've evaluated this a lot internally, and we think there's a better opportunity to complement Randall without being in the same family of reds.
Is it the color of your water bottle?
Similar,
just trying to get a sense.
similar, yeah, stay tuned, you'll see here in a moment.
Oh,
So, we've shared precedents with you along the way of a lot of sort of inspiration in other buildings, and you can see here on the left, in both of these images, there's a different vintage or era brick building with a new building next to it that is of a lighter brick tone. And after much reflection and conversation internally and thinking about the feedback that we've heard from all of you, we're proposing a composition similar to these. The image on the left feels kind of familiar. It's up in Dartmouth, but that's a Richardsonian building on the left. It's a little bit more rusticated in its detailing than Randall. There's a bit more to it in terms of masonry variation and the amount of sandstone, but it's very much in character with Randall and of that era. And then there's a new addition to it in that gray brick. We also have looked a lot more critically at Randall itself and its detailing. And it's, if you're standing far away and kind of not looking at the building that critically, you might overlook the types of brick coursing that exist. But it's interesting. There's these little protruding brick moments. There's a basket weave moment that you see up at the top of the gable there in that middle photo. And then even inside with the fireplace, there's different types of brick coursing that was added. So we're intrigued with that and want to incorporate that into our thinking.
And so off of that, we really have been thinking more of how we can play with the detailing of the brick. And so here are a few precedents. I think you might have seen them before of different, just different patterns and detailing that we could incorporate into the building to add a little bit more texture to the exterior. And then these are a bunch of studies that we had done previously to look at all of these different patterns and how they can work together with the different materials that we're considering for the exterior. And so this is kind of where we've settled at the moment. These are snippets off of the overall the elevations that we'll show in a few slides. But we're really looking at how the different materials start to connect together and where we start to use those to create a little bit more impact on like the vertical rhythm. And
So it's sort of subtle, but you're starting to see it between the windows, in the sort of vertical bands, just the opportunity that instead of a standard running bond of brick, we may introduce this sort of protruding detail to get a little bit more shadow, or this herringbone pattern, and sort of riffing off what exists in Randall now and presenting in the new composition.
And all of these details are ones that we found within the original building, every single one.
And so this is just our updated exterior analysis that's really starting to show what the vertical rhythm is of and how we're like following off of the existing building. And then these are the updated elevations. And so some of the things that we really try to focus on is creating a separation between the community room volume, so volume B, and as it is pushed back, we wanted to find a way to further that change. So we're looking at a change in tone and material as well. Whereas the front volume A, will be more masonry to talk with the existing building, whereas the back could be some form of wood or composite siding. And
we just to kind of chime in there. So obviously this is different than where we landed on DD, but like the idea of the stone base and the slate roof are consistent, and we've just really looked at that field and where the transition is from stone to masonry and then to slate differently, and are introducing that lighter tone. And it's our opinion and obviously our recommendation, that's why we're talking about it, that this is much more complementary to the original building than trying to introduce a red tone that may feel like it's competing with it and clashing with it. And it is in reaction to some things that we heard, because in the DD scheme, we had some of the slate turning down the vertical face, and some people expressed that that might feel a little too dark, that might feel a little too heavy. So we were reacting to that. And then there were other comments about, can that secondary volume, the community room volume, feel distinct from the primary volume in character, of course, but feel different. So that's why, as Audrey just said, like, we're thinking about that in a different cladding, and we are, with our estimators and input, looking at more economical solutions for that volume. And it's going to be coming back into the conversation here shortly when we start talking about cost. But we need to find opportunities to manage costs. So thinking about cladding that secondary volume differently is part of our thinking. So we'll click through these in a little bit more detail for you guys, so you can see them bigger. But here you can see the west elevation. And another comment that we're reacting to, I think actually it might have been you, Richard, or Andrew. In some of our DD schemes at our last workshop, there was comments that, like, maybe we're trying to do too much, and the elevations felt a little too busy. So we tried to simplify that. The stone base has come down and is simpler. The hat, if you will, of the slate roof is now distinct from the building itself, and overall compositionally, we've really tried to sort of streamline the composition.
So you can see in this image where those details are coming out a little bit. They're expressing the horizontality within that double height space a bit more to break up the verticality, which is another comment we heard. And we're carrying that detail over to in between all of the windows where they are expressed in like a uniform vertical manner. And then that carries over into the gasket a little bit as well. And that detail it swells a little bit, which I find very nice.
And yeah, as we go around the different sides of the building, we're really trying to keep the same sort of language that we've started in the west face, sort of like the front face. So keeping that same sort of rhythm and really looking at how we can keep horizontal lines consistent throughout, while the volumes are changing in size.
And you're also noticing on that community room volume, which is now on the right, the stone is also stopping. So as another way to help the two feel distinct from one another, but obviously part of the overall composition, and also as a way to help manage some cost impact.
Can I just ask a quick question about that? What is the transition where the mass of the community built part meets the mass of the entry, the living room? What is that, that sidewall here and coming out that you can't see? What is that going to look like?
Great question. Not like totally illustrated, obviously, in 3D here in these flat elevations, but there would be a transition at that sort of inside corner from stone.
Just a direct.
And we'd have to work through that detail to make sure it resolves itself in a way that feels good, but it would switch.
Okay.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
The windows, like the second level of windows on, well, both levels, are those double hung, or is it just some detail that's breaking up the glass?
It's an ornamental sash at the moment.
Good.
So yeah, not an operable double hung window.
Oh, similar to what's on the turret with that?
Similar, those are actually double hung, but that's
No, I
starting to
mean,
be.
on the turret, it looks like there's a stone horizontal piece breaking up those
oh,
two.
yeah,
lines.
yeah.
Is that the same?
Yeah, similar
Same
idea
idea.
to that.
Thanks.
And then I click to this one quickly, but we're starting to think about that rear side of the building, which isn't obviously as public facing or as forward facing, clad differently, as we've been saying, in a more economic material.
And as was mentioned earlier, where we have the two sets of windows, like windows on the upper level and the lower level, and they're aligned vertically, we are starting to look at how we can connect the two through some form of band in the middle with just a little bit different detailing. So it would be the same material as what we're cladding this side with, but just doing it a little bit different to start to bring around the same language from the west side.
So going to 3D here, that volumetrically in terms of the window composition should feel exactly the way it was at DD. We are starting to, are thinking about massaging the roof a little bit to try to make that as economical as we can. We'll be talking about that here in a minute, but otherwise it should feel very familiar.
And we just wanted to show that previous image. It's like a little bit zoomed out just to help locate everybody a little bit more. That box on the left is the old firehouse building, and that box kind of behind the library is the house that we had been discussing in previous meeting. We just wanted to help get that context in there a bit more, but then zoom in.
So you're able to really see the difference between the volumes here. And this is just a look at those elevations in perspective.
I have some hands. I have to control this for a minute. So Morgan, raise your hand. Morgan, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just have a question, which is looking at, maybe this is just a silly question. This feels much bigger and more open than the way the space does.
Morgan,
might have
can you
to
hear
go in
us?
there. Yeah, that's-
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Morgan. Let's see if we can hear you.
Okay. This view to locate it, which I appreciate.
Yeah, hang on 1 second.
I can hear you, Morgan. I don't think they can hear you in here.
There you go.
Okay. Morgan?
Better?
Yeah, go ahead. Now we can hear you.
This view, which I really appreciate being able to locate it, feels much more open and bigger than the space actually is. And I know that there's been questions about, how much space we're taking up. Is that just because the picture is beautiful? And I'm just curious. I cannot envision at all where all this space is, where it's coming from. And having those couple of things to sort of locate it in space is helpful, but it just doesn't, for some reason, just doesn't feel accurate. I believe that your, your numbers and distances and everything are, but is there I'm wondering, I guess, if you have any sort of explanation for the visual disparity between the existing space and the photos.
I think it's important to understand how this exists right now. We do have this photo. We should have put it in the slide, but right now when you stand in this view, you're looking at a brick wall and I believe a concrete retaining wall, and all
Okay.
of that going away. So I do kind of understand how hard it is to visualize this now, because you guys know this building really well, and you know that this view, as we put it, but it is possible to have this gentle slope down. It does not exist now. You see an 11
Okay.
foot.
Okay,
almost.
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the other big thing just to think about, and yeah, we just kicking ourselves here. We just got to put in the existing photo, because like you're looking at the entrance in that retaining wall that comes out all the way past the tower, right? So we're pushing the face of the building back significantly to expose that tower and then create a lot more space in what is now the inside of the building. Okay. Are there other hands, or should we keep going? So this is a new view that we've generated to help, we're kind of cranked around the corner a little bit more. to start to understand how that community room volume will feel independent from that primary volume. So just to click back and forth, we're kind of way over, much more over to the right now, focused more directly at the community room, and then the sort of back abutting property line.
At the
portion of the
dumpsters, if
building.
you will.
Yeah, you're kind of standing where the dumpsters are now. Yep.
And do you plan to have any of these, and we can talk about this, but for the CBA, will you be showing sort of some of these graphics?
We can, I think let's talk about it at the end of the meeting about what we feel comfortable with and what we think is appropriate, but we totally can, if that helps paint the picture. You're also seeing here very far in the distance there on the right-hand side, but you're seeing that little addition component that is our thorn in our side of trying to get that additional mechanical space in we need for the sprinkler system. But that's part of our thinking. We're trying to get to eliminate it and make it all fit inside, but we're really struggling with that. And that is reflected in the footprint diagrams. I didn't point it out, but in terms of what's been submitted to the ZBA, that little bump out is represented in what's been shared. So they're aware of that. Before we shift into the inside that sort of Andrew will talk us through, what's the sort of general reaction to the sort of recommended proposed change in brick tone?
I really don't like the gray. I really think that most people would be stunned to see it that light. First of all, especially from this angle, the light color makes it look so big, the addition. And from this perspective, from this angle, I think it overshadows the original building. The light color adds to that feeling that it's bigger. And I was hoping to see something, I understand about not wanting to clash with the red, but something more in a beige or the sandstone color, just something not so dramatically different than the brick. I think people would be very surprised to see. I think the design is fantastic. I'm really liking it, except that one little window over the doorway looks lonely. I didn't know if there was anything we could do about that. But other than that, it looks great, and I really like the way the details are being incorporated. It's just the color of the brick. I really would like to see something different.
Well, to add on to that, can you just explain why you chose gray? Maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of variations in gray. Not to make a bad analogy to a book, but and I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about the exact gray and the correct blend of brick, and is it warm tones of gray, or are there buffs or tans in it? And honestly, that conversation will continue all the way into construction when we get mock-ups and we're working with masons and we're actually figuring out the precise brick that we're going to use. But we thought, especially going back to that DD rendering as we were reflecting on it and looking at it, that felt too heavy. There was too much gray in the slate coming down the side, and that was competing with all of the gray slate that you'll see in the roof of the existing building. And then, as I was saying, the tone in the red, we don't quite have it right in these renderings, and it's so difficult because it looks different on every screen, but the red of the Randall building now is pretty unique, and it's a very it's kind of a flat red, but it's sort of mid-tone, and it's not dark enough that we could go light and that we could feel really confident that it would feel distinct, and it's not light enough that we feel like we could go darker and that it would feel distinct enough. It's kind of right in that sort of mid-zone, which makes us pretty wary about picking a red brick that we think is the right one. But there's opportunity to look at more buff bricks, or even introduce buff brick into these detail zones where we're talking about different textures. I mean, there's all sorts of variation that we could continue to refine, but we are feeling that this is a good reaction to the original brick tones.
Great, thank you. Andrew,
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I agree with the comment about the detailing. I appreciate your stepping us through your thought process and the progress that you've made internally. I think the moves to make it simpler and create a better hierarchy is good. The hierarchy within the existing or within the addition, I think is good. The A, B, C that you've got, I think that's very strong. I'm wondering, could you go back a couple of slides to the first time you show the new colored elevation?
Yeah, slow going, but we'll get there.
Yeah, that's fine. So I understand the comment about the gray in the particular rendering that we had, and I'm probably picturing some more things than other folks might be.
That's where you want to be, Andrew? Or did you want to go back?
Yeah, this is good. This is great right here. I was not expecting the red to go away, but I agree with your logic. It's like you can wear a black shirt with black pants if they're both really black, but if one's like kind of faded, look weird, and wear white shirt with white pants in summer, but like you don't want to wear like a denim shirt with your jeans. It's like it's never going to quite match. And you're never going to get a red that is going to look nice next to this deep red with the super fine joints in there. So I like going with gray. I think in the renderings, it looks almost a little off white, and I'm not sure that's the intent. I think the intent is more of a medium gray. And like you said, there's a lot of grays between slate and white. So I think some of these might be kind of just graphic issues, and it's really hard on a screen, on a monitor. I know, and things might look great on your laptop, and they look a little bit washed out. And same thing with the renderings. The detailing in the zones there, I think that's great. I like the stone base, and curious whether you'll be able to get that rusticated in the final version. And whether it looks big or not, I think it'll help you in the ZBA and every other presentation to actually take exact photograph from the same view, even if the existing building is blocked by the current addition, to show the difference, because it looks like there's more space because there is more space. It's being pushed back. So I think showing the before and after next to each other will help that argument. I don't think it looks too big. I think it looks right. I think it's well proportioned. I agree that that one window there is a little lonely. I'm sure you guys probably feel the same. So it might be a matter of zooming in a little bit even more about showing the palette of material right next to each other. I think some of your precedents show like really good textures in there, and it's just tough to match. Could you turn to the next slide? You talked about massaging the roof. There's a really funky thing happening with the parapet as it transitions to the next building, where the sloped roof stops and there's a little bump up of that. And is that necessary, or is that something you're working on?
It's something we intend to talk about in a little bit as a value management strategy. Frankly, we were hoping to get additional height in the children's room, but we think we can simplify that a lot, but also structurally. That'll benefit both the composition, but also the cost.
Okay, so it's something you're still working on?
Yeah, I mean, long way of me saying we're going to be proposing, Andrew, to lower that roof so that it's where the sloped roof stops, if that makes sense. We'll talk about it more later.
Okay. And just one more, next slide. On the left-hand side, that little line, that's where the building deflects, right? So it's a slight.
Yes.
Picks back a little bit.
Good angle. Yep.
Okay. I mean, I think this this is nice and simple. It defers to the hierarchy of the entrance side. I like the little details you've got connecting the windows on the left. So there's a lot of possibility for play in the brick there. So in general, I like the gray. I think it's having some really close-up samples of it, like next to the brick, and just some details will help fill in the imagination for folks on perspectives and renderings.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Yep.
Morgan.
I just wanted to say I also I like the gray a lot. Whatever version of gray we end up with, I think trying to match the brick and being too matchy or being too clashy is just so likely to happen that I really appreciate being able to go a different direction and tie it in. Something we've seen, I think it was in the Somerville one, but I'm sure in lots of places, that the stone base where it kind of has all the different colors that pull together, it looks like in a lot of these photos, you're trying to get some that have some type of a red brick coloring to it, which is really beautiful. And I think that's a great way of tying it in. Yeah, it was the Somerville Library that we commented that there were all these different types of materials, but it kind of brought it in and matched the stone like that. So maybe something to do when you're looking for whatever colors we're going to be using for other materials is try to find that stone first, which I think is really beautiful and striking and probably appealing for a lot of people, and then pull the colors from it, whether it's a darker gray, lighter gray, beige or gray, whatever, but it'll look like it's all very well tied in. So I think it's really, really nice. Although that one window does feel like, I don't know if you've seen the Instagram, please hate these things that are like, it either needs to have two or be in the center.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you.
First of all, I like that window. I like it's one of the few elements that's doesn't have a twin, or it's slightly off the line of symmetry. And I think I liked it. I didn't even notice it before, but when Melissa pointed it out, yeah. So what I'd like to see is more contrast between the two masses in color, if that's possible. And I also
the two new masses.
yeah. And also thinking about the gray. I like the idea of gray. And I'm going to put on my graphic design and paint hat for a minute. Warm grays, I don't know how, like a lot of people think about gray as being a cold color. There's a huge range of warm grays that can, in some light, be seen as purple or red, or, it's, so I don't know if that's possible with brick because it's a different kind of substance. But when I think of paint and ink, I know that that's possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge part of this is we'll be dialing in on the correct combination of stone and the correct combination of brick and looking at it in different lights and different exposures at different times of day because it changes dramatically. So that would be something we hope to get to once we get closer to construction, where we can actually build mock-ups and take different bricks from different blends and pull what makes the most sense together. And I don't disagree that it probably feels too monolithic on what you see here. I think that is in large part due just to the graphic expression of it. But when we look at it in more detail and look at
even looks better on your mind.
Yeah, and the enlarged versions look different. So I feel pretty confident that we can find a blend of both, warmer grays and lighter grays that feel really appropriate.
Thank you.
And it may also, when Ben says blend, it's not a single color brick. You could have two slightly different grays, and one's in there 25% and one's in there 75%. So you get more depth and texture within the color
Even in
itself.
the photograph you showed of the hood, you could see it.
Yeah.
At the museum. I don't know. That's the museum at dark.
Yes, you're correct.
So that's another thing that we'll be exploring is there a combo there rather than this kind of monolithic single color that just kind of happens in the Photoshop diagramming process as well. So
One more question. Did you give up on the idea of trying to work an arch in some way?
We did look at it more after that. I think that was 2 workshops ago, and we had explored it in the entry, but we just didn't feel confident in it or that it would be successful. don't know how to describe it. At times it felt a little gimmicky, like we were trying to do it, but like just trying to do it well. I mean, that thing is so powerful in the original building, and it's like such a feature component of that composition that it just didn't quite feel right. And I mean, we even looked at it, I don't know that we showed you, but we looked at it at the tops of the skinnier windows. It's like arched tops to the windows, and like that didn't feel quite right. So we did explore it. It just didn't, nothing really kind of hit home. Can we shift gears to
Yes.
keep moving?
So we're gonna move on to the interior here. We'll go over really what we landed on for the DD set and what was submitted to the estimator. So I think the main change here is the break room kind of protruding out in that back area, and that is to kind of get all of the sprinkler system within that mechanical room, and we need to massage to make some adjustments, and we landed on the break room being in that location right now. We're still working through the layout of the mechanical room to see if we can kind of push that break room back in, but that's it in process. In general, these plans are mostly the same though. But what we've added on here and what we got estimated was the materials and the flooring on these. And these, you see the flooring. We'll go into kind of overall palettes for these spaces in a moment though. But you see, it is kind of what we're saying here, kind of a graphic issue because of the TV, but we have stone tiling at the entrance lobby there, like on that open corner. And we have a resilient flooring in the flex room. And that's kind of like a rubber tile floor. It's just can wear and tear. We're proposing movable furniture in there, so you want to really have that last. In that center zone, we actually have a cork floor drawn here. We have a wood floor estimated. They're roughly the same. It's cork will be a little quieter. It's a little more of a unique material that we've used lately and we really like. And then just carpet tiling, pretty simple with a single accent color in the stack area.
Just to expand that a little bit more, like there's a million variations on tone of brick, like there's a million variations on carpet tiles and like what is in them, what color are they, and like we're not there yet on like what we're proposing specifically. It's just to say that we imagine there's a field color that's, you know, one tone, and then a perimeter that bleeds into the meeting rooms and the teen room that are another color. But we'll get into more detail in all of those with all of you and provide options for discussion.
The first floor main level, mostly the same. Children's library, children's collections, taking up that same amount of footprint. We've discussed kind of the library director's office expanding and moving down to get the restroom in there and that wall opening up. And we'll see that in some perspectives soon. But similar diagram here, children's library, where we'll be proposing a more colorful carpet tile accents design to make that space quite a bit more exciting. And that lobby will be the same flooring material as the lobby below, and that kind of whole procession goes up through the lobbies and puts you in both buildings. And then that flooring in the historic building is going to remain the same. That flooring, we've been looking at that a lot, and there's an enormous range of color within that floor, and it's in really good shape as well. So that was actually one reason why we started looking at cork rather than wood, is because it's the same thing as the brick outside, where we don't want to use Andrew's analogy, we don't want to wear denim jeans and a denim shirt. And cork actually has more of a variation in its single tile texture. So it's a nice complement to that very unique flooring. So I'm just gonna go through a bunch of these palette slides. It's just single images of each of the materials, and you'll see some white boxes too that mostly represent white paint. Just gives you an overall understanding of these spaces without fully rendering them out. So the interior turret, Denise, would you mind moving the? There's also,
Like me
gonna-
to move it.
yeah, this is gonna be a hard one. But that,
Yeah, start thinking about this one.
yeah, I know, the middle would be the best.
Stay there.
I'll just hold it.
Yeah. This, this interior turret space will have, we've, in the DD set, we proposed a lot of wood. So that bottom right image is pretty expressive of what we were thinking for this. It's got a really warm feeling to it. So that's why the ceiling we've wood, and there's wood millwork, wood walls, and a lighter floor.
Can I just ask a question about that finish in that turret where there will be teenagers who are prone to doing things when people aren't looking?
Like writing on
Is it
walls.
fairly resilient to
Sharpies?
inundation by pens and Sharpies and
Let's
scratching your initials into
Let's
it and
clarify.
that sort of
I
thing?
think, Lisa, so when we say interior turret, we're meaning the new lobby space, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. When we say interior turret, we're referring to the double height entry lobby space, which is
Oh,
sort of
okay.
our
Got it.
interpretation of the turret in the double height space. So it's not the existing turret that will become the team space.
I see, okay. Good question.
The browsing and arrival space, which is kind of directly adjacent to that interior turret space. We have a wood ceiling and a cork floor, and then a bright just gypsum ceilings and walls. And that's kind of what you'll see in a lot of these. So, but of course not in this one, the community flex space. There is, and we think of this space as a bit more of a jewel of this building. It does have that resilient floor, resilient tiling, which has a million choices to it, a million field colors, and a million accent colors. But we have a felt ceiling in here, which will help a lot with acoustics. And it's a really nice product that we have there in the top left, and it's actually what we used at West Branch for a similar space. And we have glass, which kind of extends out into the landscape, similar to that top right image, and wood wainscoting, which is similar to what is in the historic building. There's wainscoting around all of those spaces. We wouldn't directly copy any of those details, but we consider those dimensions and kind of riff off of those. The circulation space, which is where that cork floor was. Again, that's kind of where the cork would be. There would also be wood millwork, and it'd be close to the original wood, and we're proposing wood stair treads as well. And then also the existing brick wall will be heavily expressed in that circulation zone. And a vinyl graphic, which you'll see here is just expressed as a green. We had a bunch of different things plugged in there, actual images, but we decided to not show that. But we're considering expressing this wall or these two walls as a pretty large vinyl graphic. But
It's basically like putting printed wallpaper, for lack of a better way to describe it. Like it's another design exercise that we hope to get to, but picking up on something, of the town. We've got some sampling images here, either a historic image or an orchard or, something, and then turning that into, a wall treatment as sort of an accent within the building.
And it's something that we've done on a lot of buildings that especially have like a significant wall space. It's really helpful, and it gives you a kind of another stopping point in the building to look at, like why people like looking at big maps, and like you can really express the town of Stowe with a really big map right there. Things like that. There's a few images we've kind of fallen in love with, like that middle right one that we'd consider looking at. Here's that the view up the stair, looking at the turret in the background. You can see the cork floor and 2 different wood tones in the millwork. So that's kind of another thing that we're exploring is whether it's a single type of wood or 2. Probably not going to do more than 2. It gets really heavy, especially in a small building like this. But we really like this view. Something we may not have really expressed to you all, but we've gotten excited about is this kind of light sculptural moment within the staircase. That's really a series of shelving that goes all the way up. Could hold little artifacts or books or whatever. But
There
it's
you go.
it's
All those teacups, implements of farming, there they go.
it's kind of a lovely metaphor to think that you're like walking up into the bookcase, and you would go up to the children's library through here, so you can really attract interest to the children, into the adult section circulator of the collections. The meeting rooms have a light touch. The accent carpet of the collection space, we consider bringing into that just to represent those rooms, and then the rest is glass and white. They're small spaces. We want to make sure that they don't appear too dark. We want to try and make them as light as possible without being blinding. Collections is kind of a similar feeling to that, but it has the field and the accent carpet.
Oh, now you're killing me.
We'll get a measurement of that box next time. Those were all the lower level spaces. The upper level, we just finished this image up and we really love it. It's really nice. I think so. This view, if you look in the little bottom left corner for a moment, this is standing right now, kind of where the restrooms are on the main floor, and looking out towards the door to the patio, if that helps at all. So
The upper floor for currently, the current upper.
the current upper floor. So we are proposing to make the opening between the building bigger so that it's not just a single doorway. That is one comment that we always keep in the back of our mind, is that these buildings need to feel like one building, not 2. And then you can see the new staircase in the background and the children's library right behind that. So you can see quite a bit farther through this space, and then you can see the existing floor and the existing wainscoting, which is that wood that just goes up roughly 3.5 feet. So we'd be removing that door that goes out to the patio and just putting a glass handrail there, which then looks down on the stairs. And if you just look across, you see into the children's space. And then you can slightly see the elevator on the left there. For the children's space, like I said, we look to have a kind of more colorful accents color, potentially more colorful field color for the floor. As you can see, kind of 2 images of on the right, and a wood ceiling in some parts of it, but not covering the entirety of the space. It would be a gyp ceiling in probably the majority of the space. This is a similar view to what we showed before, but you can see that concept for the accent of the floor, and also 2 tones of millwork here. But I just want to point out that window on the farthest left window on that back wall is that standalone window. And so it's there because on the interior it matches with the others. It just doesn't on the exterior, but it would still be a nook for kids to sit in. So really that window, more poetic way, like there'd be somebody sitting in that single window. So that's why that window is still in the design.
Are the other windows also nooks?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And the historic rooms, we looked at that interior perspective of, but we're looking to really maintain these materials. They're in really good shape. We've gotten a much better look at them now, and I mean, they're in even better shape than we anticipated. So those kind of natural colors will remain very similar. We considering adding a lighter tone to the paints, like white in that top right image. Those are, there's a whole science to white, just like there is to gray. So we'd look at a kind of more antique white color, and probably different tones of white, but it would bring out the natural colors and textures of the wood better than we think the color is there now. And we probably look to sand down the walls too. They're not really in like the best shape. It doesn't seem like that paint was applied as professionally as it could have. So just the compilation of those interior images here. I think that's the last of. Yeah, this is the last of the interior. So do you guys have any comments?
So the upper right image there, that green area is the area you're talking about having the graphic wallpaper. And that's the elevator shaft, right? And so you're gonna make, okay, I like that. The fact that- So will it be something you can see from all four sides?
I'm thinking yes, but like it's, that's a whole, as you guys have probably noticed with design, just the more detailed you get, you just continue to get into further iterations of what something could be. And I mean, that's a whole investigation on what that is from a design perspective. And we'd obviously have to talk with all of you and probably others about what the right images are and go through that whole process. But yes, I mean, we're hoping to accent that elevator as a key element in the building through graphic.
When you look at all the different flooring, what kind of maintenance you guys looking at for that kind of the different products? I'd like to have, like, when you resilient tile, I'd like to get like a no wax tile.
Okay, that's good to know.
Because, stripping floors is,
Yep.
we have no way to really dump it when we strip it.
Yep.
Accept it.
Great comment, and I think something we'll think about and find the right product and that works for all of you.
I think a lot of places are going that way too, just kind of think environmentally, not having to strip and wax.
Totally. Yep.
And that, like the cork, what kind of a product is that? I'm just kind of, not to derail the
It's-
conversation.
It's an engineer, there's all sorts of different types.
Was it an engineered cork?
It's engineered and it's, tiles that kind of click together like any engineered floor. But
It's probably a pretty sturdy product.
It's pretty sturdy. It's really nice underfoot and it has really nice acoustic properties to it.
Nice.
So we can look at that. We did recently install that on a big project up at Dartmouth.
That's probably a no wax product, I would think.
It gets waxed initially,
Those are really, yeah.
but it's very long lasting. And we can look at it and get into that level of conversation with all of these finishes.
Yeah, when you get down to that, nitty gritty, let me know
Totally.
what it's looking like.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're not, I mean, we like the cork. We think it would be nice. And I think as Andrew suggested, instead of like a plank, like all of the wood flooring that exists in the upper level, it's a tile. So it just like compositionally will feel different than the wood, but tonally, I think we'll accent it nicely, and it just has a really nice quality underfoot.
Well, it depends where it is in the building too.
Yep.
In terms of how much maintenance we have to do.
Right. Yeah, and we've talked about that, but this is just starting to make the suggestions on
No,
what
I
the materials are,
understand.
but we'll come with like actual, suggested products and be able to look at it all.
How much did you consider costing all of it?
We're gonna be talking about that. And we're gonna have to likely be dialing back. So this is all exciting to see, and that's my segue into the next section, but we do have a pretty big cost hurdle to get over. So I think, just to start that conversation, thinking about porcelain tile instead of stone, we need to be thinking about ACT ceilings. When I say ACT, the acoustic ceiling tiles, nicer than this version, but instead of drywall. because there's savings there. So we need to be having those conversations, which we're about to get into. Because there's a lot of work to be done.
Everyone needs to take a deep breath.
Yeah, so on that
Weekend
note,
cost.
I mean, you set it up.
A nice clarifying
you-
breath.
You set it up well.
Prepare yourself.
We are in a challenging spot from a cost perspective. It's not, I think, uncommon to, think aspirationally up to a certain point of design and then reach a point where you really need to start dialing it back. So we've had a couple pretty big changes in SD that have driven cost up substantially. So we'll review that here with you guys and then start thinking about these value management strategies. Some of which we've already hinted at. So we have, since the SD estimate, seen approximately $1 million increase in the direct construction cost. We are at about 8.1 at schematic design, and we're about 9.2 right now. There are some substantial drivers to that, which we'll talk through, but you're getting a hint at it here with what you see on the right in those sort of plus numbers. The building systems, the MEP FP number has gone up dramatically for a couple reasons, not the least of which is the goal to go all electric. That was not carried in schematic design, and that is carried now, and that has impact on the mechanical system. There have been refinements to the site improvements. There have been changes to the architectural components that have all driven the cost up. I'm going to come back to this slide in a second, John, to talk soft cost, but just to keep on what's sort of changed. We've got here a summary of the key cost drivers. It's not all of them. There are others, but these are the biggest contributors. So the electrified HVAC system paired with the custom air handling unit to meet all of the energy objectives has driven up that HVAC number quite a bit from what we had in SD. We are now carrying a hazardous material remediation cost within the construction number, which we had accounted for in the soft cost previously, but we pulled it into the number now. It's $200,000 that we have in this estimate now that we didn't previously. The building did increase size.
The hazardous material is in the existing building as you tear out the new part.
Yeah, so we have had an abatement or a hazardous material consultant through the building. They've identified what's hot, so to speak, and what is hazardous, either asbestos or otherwise, and they have provided us with their reasonable, what they think is an appropriate cost estimate to include. That's where we got that $200,000 number. Previously, we had it in soft costs and
At a lower
number,
too,
and so we've got a real number now, and we put that into the construction cost. So that's a $200,000 bust right there. The building did increase size. So as we finessed the ramp at the end of SD, and as we finessed the entry sequence and the community room size, the building footprint has increased by about 500 square feet. The grand scheme of things, that may not seem like a lot of space, but in an 8,000 square foot library, it's not insignificant. So that's part of the driving the cost. The longer utility runs, it's sort of an estimating thing, but we didn't have enough utility costs estimated in SD. We did add, you'll recall at the end of SD, the roof was flat on the addition. We went through the whole investigation of what that roof form should be. So that has contributed to it. And then just generally, there's more defined interior finishes and landscape. So to answer your question, like there's more information on the types of materials, and that has driven the cost, and we need to be thinking about that. So it's not uncommon to be in this position where at some point during the design process, you need to enter what many refer to as value engineering or value management and start to think about how you can start to refine things back to where they need to be. And the reality is that's where we are. The delta is more than we'd certainly like to see, but we need to start thinking that way. And just broadly, which doesn't help where we're at. It's happening with all of our clients across all building types and all building program. not just municipal libraries in the higher ed sector, in the public sector, construction costs continue to just be through the roof. I mean, we're now at a blended cost of nearly $1,000 a square foot for this building. And we are not plating it in gold. You're not doing really anything exuberant. It's just the nature of the market, which is really difficult to manage. It wasn't that long ago that this would have been built for $400 or $500 a square foot, like literally several years ago, 2018, 2019, we probably would have been in that range. And it is just a dramatic increase. But like I said at the very beginning, we think there's ample time to react to this, and there's ample time to manage it. So even since we went through our reconciliation process on Thursday, where we had our estimator and the other cost estimator, who actually worked quite a bit far apart, come together at this 9.2 number, we have started to develop value management strategies that we've put forward on screen this evening to start that conversation. And we're proposing in a couple weeks on that July 12th meeting to go through these in more detail and have actual cost for each of them. We've broken them into sort of two buckets right now, significant and moderate, because there are like bigger ticket items that we should immediately hone in on. But then there's other items in that sort of moderate or smaller category, however you want to say it, that in aggregate can add up to quite a bit too. So we need to really at this stage be thinking about everything and going through it. And then when we're back together in a couple weeks, having some challenging and difficult conversations and making these difficult decisions on what it is that we need to be considering to reduce. So on the HVAC strategy, we think there's opportunity for 6-digit savings to reconsider our approach to the building HVAC design. So when we come back in a couple weeks, we're going to bring our engineer with us and kind of talk through all of those and what those mean to the project in terms of maintenance and all of that, and go through those options. But that is a big area to target from where we're at. The second one there, alternating cladding and reducing the height of the community room volume. We were already hinting at that in what we were showing you before, and we've got a diagram here to talk about it, but we think we can reduce that volume and simplify its construction from a structural perspective to realize some savings. We think we should reevaluate the building footprint, potentially the ramp. That is a direct thing that was added that increased square footage. Or maybe thinking about the community room capacity. So right now we've got the community pinned at around 35 to 40 occupants. I think that's the goal, but even a reduction to around 25 could get us down to a reduction of a couple hundred square feet that could have six-digit savings associated with it. Simplify the framing of how to achieve that roof geometry. I think we've already had a couple conversations with our engineer on how to do that. And make that just more straightforward to construct and easy to construct. That would realize some savings. We think there's opportunity in how the foundations are designed to realize savings. Hydraulic versus a traction elevator. We can get into what exactly that means, but it's just different types of how elevators work. They still do the same thing, get you from top to bottom, but the guts to make that happen, we think there's opportunity to find savings there. And then the prefabricated site walls, we put that in the significant value category because we think there is good money to be saved there if those are prefabricated, which we can talk about what that means, but that's something, there's a lot of them, and we could think about those as a target savings.
You talking about SIPs?
No. So there's a way to prefabricate stone site walls, with the stones that you want, but they're done off-site, they're prefabricated, and they arrive on site, they're sort of erected, rather than building them in place, sort of a typical traditional way. So that's all sort of stuff in the significant value, and then I won't go through everything in the moderate value now, but do we think there's savings there that in total can add up? The first one, as Andrew mentioned, we've got upwards of $50,000 to $60,000 in refinishing the woodwork in the historic building, the upper level in those historic rooms and around the windows and all the wainscoting. And just short answer, like, we don't think we need to do that. It's in really good condition. It was restored not too long ago. That's an easy, low-hanging fruit thing to consider. And then all of the other material choices and just being more cost conscious, as I said, porcelain tile instead of stone, or ACT ceilings in select locations instead of drywall. Even on the exterior, thinking about hardy board panels instead of masonry on that back volume. All of that stuff will add up to have have an impact. And then we also put shelving. So right now we're in our documents, we're purchasing all new library shelving. And around the perimeter of that collection space, we're proposing, or at least in the documents, have all new millwork. So it's built by a millwork fabricator. But we think it's a straightforward thing to consider reusing, or at least using metal shelving on the perimeter, and then
You
cladding
better
it.
tell the staff that
Um,
metal shelving is a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, not all of this stuff is ideal, but
I
like
know,
it's. we-
But
we have
continuing
be-
to work in the existing building will also be a nightmare, and this will not go forward unless we cut
I
money.
know, but if I had
Um,
to choose,
so-
that would be one of them.
All of this is to say, we think you see at the bottom there, target reduction. We think there's real significant savings to be found. We've already started these conversations with John and our cost estimators coming up a Thursday. And we intend to come back on the 12th and kind of lay this out in more detail for us all to make some decisions. But we think there's, hopefully up to $500,000 that we can get off of that bottom line. I don't think we're going to be able to get it all off, but we could hopefully get a lot of it off.
Before you move forward, is what you have listed here getting to that target reduction of 300? I mean, would we have to do all that to get to that target reduction? Or are those two things not related necessarily? There's a target to reduce, there's ways we could get there.
They're related, and we do have some numbers for some of these, but we don't have numbers for all of them. And of course, there's a big difference between $300,000 and $600,000. So that's, we need to understand like what the target is that we need to get to, and then figure out ways in which to get there. But I think if you were to take all of the things that are on there, not even all of them, you would land somewhere in that target.
Can you also, I mean, when this stuff is pulled together, will we see the differentiators for what we're trying to accomplish by meeting green expectations, but wouldn't necessarily need to do in order to remodel the building or reconstruct the building?
I'm not sure I understand.
So just the things that have been because we're a green community, those things tend to be more expensive.
Right.
So are there options where we could not violate what we're doing as a community, but not necessarily incorporate every possibility as we move forward with the building?
I think so. I mean, I think the biggest, obviously we're making smart material choices that are low VOC and sort of check all of those boxes. But from a big sustainability initiative, it's mostly energy use and the type of HVAC system and being all electric. But we think there's ways to still be all electric, but at a lesser cost. And that's what we really want to evaluate, because that's going to move the dial the most. And on that note, it's a bit of a silver lining. Let's go through these diagrams quickly. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we're just starting to highlight some things that we want to put on the table and what they might mean to the building. So, if we are able to reduce the community room capacity a little, we can remove some of that 500 square feet that were added. If we consider removing the ramp, we could probably get pretty close to all of it. So those are some of the more difficult decisions that we'll need to make. Material choices, type of hydraulic elevator, those might be a little bit more straightforward to do. But just to share how that might impact the plan. Site walls, these are the site walls I was referring to. So all of the granite site walls that we have in stone, thinking about those differently, still achieve the same goals from a landscape perspective, but do it in a more economical way. And then on the building exterior, reducing the footprint of that rear volume and also lowering it. So this diagram here will help explain that a little bit better. Missed it, but I thought we had one that showed the reduction height. That's my mistake. But I was talking about it earlier, that and Andrew on not Andrew Brooks, but Andrew from the building committee was asking about that sort of transition in height from the primary volume to the secondary. We think we can reduce the height of that secondary volume that then of course reduces cladding and all sorts of other things that will have an impact. So that's what we're alluding to here with this diagram. But the silver lining that I was mentioning is in response to the gas versus electric boiler. So we now have, through our estimating process, a better understanding of the supplemental heat source and the upcharge, if you will, or the premium to go to an electric supplemental heat source instead of gas. And you can see it in the upper right there highlighted in blue. It's around a $50,000 premium. But that paves the way for a much more, for a grant that sort of makes the return on investment quite a bit more clear. You know, we were thinking that the premium would be six figures, and we were wary of like, would it be that appetizing to pursue from a grant perspective? But I think this this helps make that decision a little bit more clear, hopefully.
What's the idea about how likely that grant is for us?
I don't know that we can quantify or
I mean, like,
put it like a, put it, you know, the way it was explained to us is it's highly competitive. And only candidates who are all electric, zero fossil fuels have been awarded it to date.
is there any historical information available? How many apply? How many are
Success
awarded?
ratio, if you will. There could be something out there. I would have to investigate, but you know, I'll do that for the sake of best informing the committee, because I think it's going to be a pretty critical decision.
But there are benefits to being all electric besides getting the grant. It'd be nice to not use fossil fuel.
Yeah, oh, totally.
From a moral perspective,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I don't disagree there at all. It's a lot more appealing if we're successful in a $500,000 grant to help get a number down. And it makes just the ratio of investment versus potential return that much clearer.
Ben, would you mind going back to the plan diagram? I would like to discuss a few of the elements here that we're proposing so that we can prepare for the next new meeting in 2 weeks with all of this reacted to. I think there are some really critical elements here that are like really seriously worth considering. I mean, the change to elevator that's an easy one for us, where we've pretty much already made that change. And
This is a hydraulic elevator, right? The one we have in
Yes,
this
it is.
building?
Because we had a hydraulic fluid leak
Yeah.
and it was down for quite some time and cost us a lot of money. That's-
I didn't think it was gonna go dark. I was
Here we
gonna
are.
say, well, this elevator seems to be fine, but.
That's my first thought when I saw hydraulic.
And that's kind of where some of these benefits are. It might not be entirely visual with what we have estimated, and some of these proposed elements aren't going to be visible, like or at least immediately. I mean, changing the roof from a steel frame to a wood frame, that actually won't have a significant impact, except we won't be able to have a more sculptural ceiling because of the construction type. So with that comes a kind of reduced importance of that interior turret itself. And so, but that's a big major item that we could definitely do, and it'd be a big cost savings that we'd like to see, I think.
Wait, I'm confused. A minute ago, you said there wasn't a big difference between it, and now you just.
I mean, like an immediate kind of overall difference, but it's I apologize for needing to use our imagination here. We wouldn't be able to consider any adjustments in the ceiling of the children's library we'd be limited to things like that, and we wouldn't be able to do a nice ceiling, a nice sculptural ceiling within the turret, the interior turret. But it's
What do you mean by a sculptural ceiling?
we had a nice like open what's the phrase for it? Not arched, but
Crawford?
Vaulted,
What is-
vaulted ceiling.
ceiling. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, we had a vaulted ceiling in there. We had a few other things that we carried in the documents, like a skylight as well. Those things we wouldn't really be able to carry anymore.
But there would be a big cost savings going wood versus steel.
Yeah, and leveling the roofs like we were talking about. It's, it would stuff that we would notice as like a design team and client who've been working together through this process, but like at the end of the day, it wouldn't have like a dramatic change on the public's perception of the building and the success of the building. So I think, we have to weigh all of these things together.
Andrew?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, and to your Andrew. So the wood would be a truss, right? So you would have a bottom member that would keep you from vaulting into the space of the roof, right? So you wouldn't be able to go into that roof.
Yeah, and we would actually post up from that too.
Okay, and does that mean you wouldn't be able to have those two skylights which poke up into the children's room? Would the ceiling come through that? We'd still have those skylights?
We would have to work with the structural engineer to get the width on that. The widths might change, but they'll have the steel band wrap. And it's getting into the structural, but there's steel band wrapping around that, which we would still have. So.
Thank you.
But another big topic is the ramp. It's easy math to think about. It's a little less than 500 square feet at $1,000 a square foot. We wouldn't get all $500,000 back. We consider probably getting back half of the square footage cost, but $250,000.
What would happen there? I mean, if you don't have a ramp, it's just flat floor, or you relocate the elevator?
We'd replan it. So that little,
Okay.
probably the little bump out of the.
Would go away, yeah.
Go away, and we have to massage where
Okay,
things
got
are,
But with that also comes, additional maneuvers that could help. Having an elevator up against an exterior wall has impact on the cost. We don't need columns on all sides because it would be up against the wall, and we could build off of just one or two sides of that elevator rather than carry columns all the way around, which support the joists above. So that's another cost that actually the structural engineer has suggested moving the elevator. They think that would be a pretty major item that could help.
I have a question about that. If we were to consider removing the ramp, I saw that the square footage of the elevator is 45 square feet. How many people is that? Would you estimate that it could have in one? How many people can you fit in there, basically?
I think it has a 2,000 pound weight capacity. So I mean that you could jam 10 people in there, but comfortably 3, 4, 2 or 3 strollers maybe as well.
Okay.
Not
we
as
do have
well.
it at the minimum size that building
Yeah.
codes allow. And capacity is based on weight, not how many people.
Sure, I was just curious for people with disabilities who are gonna be needing to utilize that space. I mean, a lot of people who are wheelchair bound are gonna have a lot more
Mhm.
size, and I just
Sure.
was curious how that would look, because that's kind of the purpose mostly, aside from wheeling carts up and down the ramp for library staff.
Yeah.
How that would look for people with disabilities who have other equipment that needs to go inside the elevator and getting up and down and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's a full elevator. It's not what's in the library right now. It's,
Okay,
it's,
yeah.
yeah.
And it meets, I mean, it meets all accessibility requirements. It's just the minimum size.
I would imagine it's somewhat similar to what we have
Yeah.
here.
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
I was just curious, because I just wanted to be able to visualize like what that would be like, yeah.
Just sometimes they actually make smaller elevators, just for people, one person and a person with a wheelchair. Oh, it might have been in buildings like that. They tend to open up more with a hinge door.
Hmm.
And those actually meet the accessibility requirements.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, because they're just for that. So
Mhm.
this is gonna be a,
You're gonna put another lift in the new building.
no.
Would you,
Yeah, can you swap this out for Lula?
I mean, I was a obviously huge supporter of the ramp. I still am, but the way you're describing it and moving the elevator, it seems like a good idea in terms of saving money.
would we think about anything as radical as not reopening the old entrance? Eliminating all that need for that paving outside and all that?
I think at this stage, anything should be on the table. We hadn't thought that far.
But then
but- I mean,
I'm not necessarily in favor of it, but when you think about the mass of construction that has to happen both inside and outside to make that a reality, it's just worth discussing, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. That, for us, I think that would be the hardest out of these options to swallow, but, I mean, I think it's worth just discussing, at least.
And I do want to add, I mean, the target for Design Lab is 300 to 600,000. I still have to cover over a $2 million overage, so anything that we could cut is necessary in my opinion, because I still don't have that money to cover.
Right.
So,
Can you go over those numbers because I'm confused between, so we approved,
8,850,000.
Can you go back to that slide that has the three?
If you tell me how far back I can go, oh, that was one of the first.
I'll get it there. It's not too far back. It's just
All
one
right,
more.
Andrew has his hand raised while
Yeah,
we're.
I saw that. It's okay.
So there is no top on the last one.
It just goes through the roof. Purposefully, there is no top listed.
okay, so we approved 8.8, and then there was a number of, it was the 11 to 12, I guess, I was thinking 12, but it was 11 the last time we talked about an increase.
Well, you had a construction budget of 6.5 million, just construction. So the new number that we're talking about, the 9.2, was just for construction.
But other costs have grown too. So the purple color has gotten much larger, the blue has gotten a bit larger.
Right, but in total, the construction costs started at 6.5 for the concept design almost 2 years ago. It went to 8.1 in SD and it's now at 9.2. And
Your
then
soft
Right, so
costs,
that was,
Right,
the soft costs will grow in proportion. To
right, but we have to pay for the whole project.
yeah, like,
We
that's what I
can't
wanted to
just-
know, what
yeah,
does the public
exactly.
need to know here?
Well, the public has approved $8,850,000.
Then there was
Wow.
the report in the paper that said it was going to be 11 or 12.
To be honest, I don't know what was in the paper. I don't trust those numbers completely that was published.
Okay, well, one of our last
yeah.
meetings, what was the number that was?
Yeah, it was, close to the 11 million is where we had come in from SD estimates.
Okay.
And that's when I had come here and said, I can't ask the taxpayers to pay more.
Right.
I will have to absorb that.
Right,
Now we're more than $1 million higher than that number.
okay.
Andrew?
Oh, you're still on mute, Andrew.
You muted.
Thank you. Thanks for presenting the options in terms of order of magnitude, because I think everyone looks at finishes and you're never gonna save $1 million with ceiling tiles and carpet. There's just not enough of it in the building. So I'm advocating for really accepting almost anything out there and adding it all up just to make the project happen. I think the HVAC, if we can make it all electric and find an alternate system, we should definitely do it. I'm happy to see the below grade options on there, because those things that happen before the building even gets out of the ground can add some of the most cost to it. In terms of the ramp, I agree. I was a big advocate for the ramp. I like the message of accessibility that it gives. You know, that said, it's adding to the volume and amount of the building, and you can't cheap the building out enough to say that you have to make the building smaller. And if that's a way to do it, then I would advocate for doing that. It's a relatively small transition that we're making. It's just going up a couple of feet. We're not going to get huge volumes of people using the elevator. I don't think there'll be a line. There could be a challenge if it does break. You know, we don't have 2 elevators, and ramps don't break. But it's going to be a new elevator versus the one that's in there now. So I would advocate for accepting almost all of these to make it happen, particularly anything that makes the building smaller.
And just a comment on what I previously said, but all of those images that we showed on the interior, those were chosen strategically because those wouldn't be really affected that much by these proposed changes. So those views would generally stay the same. If that helps at all understand where we've kind of been looking for these impacts.
Morgan?
Thanks, Gina. I have one question, then I have a more important one. When we talk about the ramp, are we talking about the inside or the outside ramp?
Inside.
Inside. Okay, thank you. So what I'm wondering is, I guess I have a 2-part question. That previous slide with the amounts of money amounts to more or less $1 million, yet we're looking at an increase of about 3 million. So I guess one of my questions is, where's the other 2 million costs coming from? And then my other thought is, especially because of some of the feedback we've been seeing in the town, do we want to maybe consider having another type of community meeting where we put out these options of like things like meeting, you know, all electric standards, or being accessible, or having green space, or all the things that everybody has voted on having? We might be able to get some consensus from the town what they're willing to sacrifice, so that if for no other reason, they can feel like they're a part of it, but also to understand why these costs, like, you know, people think, oh, we're going to make a super fancy building and that's why it's expensive. And that's just not the case. So helping people understand where these rising costs are coming from, and they're all coming from areas that the town has collectively voiced are important to them. Maybe that's something we could consider trying to do.
I will just comment though, Morgan, that the sacrifice is not on the taxpayers' behalf, technically, it's on the money that we have to find in the overage. So I have said I will, the goal was to take fundraising, any further donations, any further trust fund money, and then I would have to incorporate the remainder in my budget, with the understanding that that means cuts elsewhere in the budget. But I am willing to do that to see this project come to fruition. But I've made it clear, I can't fund the entire 2 million, and I certainly can't fund a $3+ million overage. So any cuts are benefiting the money that we have to find now that has not been approved by the town.
Okay, but I mean, maybe this is a naive question, but does it really matter? The people of the town are going to think that they're paying for it one way or another, whether it was the voted on amount or it's coming out of the budget somewhere else. So getting the more accurate word out of why the increase have happened, and asking for feedback on what are the more important parts of it to them, I still think could be meaningful. But that is, I guess, extra time and coordination. So maybe it's a lost cause, and if they cared, they would have joined the committee.
I think that would be sort of the role of handling the fundraising.
Or this committee. I mean, I think asking the public is fine.
Or informing the public.
Right, I think it should be more of having a conversation when decisions are made, because if the people say, well, we don't want to lose this and we don't want to lose that and we like this, and then we're still in the same position. I think personally, decisions need to be made, and then it's more about educating the community about why these decisions had to be made. I don't know how many people are actively following. I mean, I can see very few people are watching these meetings after the fact. So I don't know how invested the community really is in the specifics, or if they've taken to see the building layout or the current design structures. So I don't know how much will impact them. The feedback I'm hearing based on some stuff that ran in the newspaper is stick to the 8,850,000, and that's what people want us to stick with. So I don't think that that's even remotely feasible.
Right, okay, all right, point made.
That would be my perspective, is more educating on why some of the cuts are being proposed, versus asking for opinions from people that will be all over the map. I mean, you'll have people that want the ramp, that want the community room, that
Right,
want,
okay,
I think that'll be more difficult.
okay.
Richard.
Yeah, can you give us an idea of the other things you'd have to cut elsewhere, at least generally in the budget?
Budgets, capital, it'll
I mean,
affect,
can you
it'll
give some
affect,
examples of things that,
I can't, it'll affect every departmental budget, it'll affect capital plans that we put forward. I will have to cut across the board in order to incorporate this within Prop 2.5 budgets. So I can't, we don't have enough money that I can say I'm cutting this or I'm cutting that. It could mean staffing levels across the board, it could mean we don't buy any vehicles or replace vehicles for several years. Until I see how much I have to incorporate, I don't know. But we don't have, where most small towns, it's all personnel costs, personnel related. We have very little expense and we have very little discretionary spending. So the cuts will have to be in mostly equipment, maybe changing hours, looking at things that we can do elsewhere, but it will have an effect on the general fund budget.
On this, in the same vein here, I'm relatively new to this, so I just want to clarify. We're kind of at a place where we're pretty confident we can't meet the 8 point whatever it is million. But we're also pretty confident that we can't take on this overage, and we're saying even if we cut to like the greatest extent, we still have this overage that we have to deal with, that you were saying that will be cut out of the town's budget, right? So is there still an opportunity for fundraising? Because there was some kind of some confusion as to whether certain groups would be able to fundraise to try to maybe not meet that gap, because I don't know how big it's going to be, but contribute to that? Or what do you think? Is that a possibility?
There is, the difficulty in all of this is we have to have an approval at the special town meeting in September to spend more money.
Mhm.
I can't go to the taxpayers and say, authorize, and I'm just completely, I'm gonna make up a really crazy number because I don't want false. Say, I can't go to the taxpayer and say, authorize $30 million if I can't find that money at the end of the day. Because once they authorize it, I have to find it. We have no choice. So if we say fundraising, trust funds, but then at the end of the day, the fundraising doesn't meet the quota, the trust funds don't have any more money to give, I'm still stuck finding that. So I have to be comfortable enough with whatever number we go into and whatever plans are in place between now and then, that I can comfortably advocate for why or how I'm going to pay for this outside of sources.
What happens if it doesn't pass at that meeting?
Then it doesn't go forward. It stays at the 8,850,000.
Okay,
So you are comfortable going back to town meeting and asking for something more?
No,
Not something. more
no,
than
we are required, town meeting has to authorize the appropriation to spend. They have only authorized the town to spend 8,850,000. I have to ask them to spend more, not necessarily pay more, but they have to authorize the spending of more money. But that's with the understanding that I have the money to then spend. So it's a good faith effort that I'm saying to them, please put your faith in us that we're going to raise money. We're gonna have this, and then I can incorporate the rest of it within the budget.
Sorry, because I just don't understand how this works. You don't have $8.8 million. We're borrowing that money, right?
Correct.
So if you were authorized to spend $10.5 million, it's borrowing more money, fundraising notwithstanding, but the fundraising's not going to kill this problem.
Yep.
Then you're just basically asking the taxpayers, would you fund this through your taxes at a higher amount?
No.
That's not what's happening.
There-
Okay.
There's different methods of borrowing. So borrowing as a debt exclusion that's outside of Prop 2.5, is borrowing within the budget within Prop 2.5. I'm proposing the overage. It still has to be borrowed. I can't make a lump sum of $2 million. So it would be some form of borrowing that then I would incorporate over a course of, say, 20 years within the general fund budget, the debt payment on that piece. In addition to the borrowing for it's 6 million and change because of the underfund. But so we have a debt exclusion borrowing for 6 million, outside Prop 2.5, inside Prop 2.5, inside the levy limit, not costing the taxpayer more on your actual tax bill coming in with what you already pay, that we would have the $2 million borrowing.
I think I understand.
You're just taking it from another pot, right? I mean. in the
Yes,
end,
so
it's
I'm
just-
still taking the money that you all pay for your taxes, it's just being distributed differently. So that's why I have to make sacrifices elsewhere, because I can't get more money from you within that new borrowing. So I have to shuffle things around to make those payments. And I'm willing to do that to a certain limit, but once it starts creeping up, I can't sacrifice town departments across the board.
Right.
So
So in essence, we really have to examine cutting a lot more than $600,000.
ideally, it would be nice to look at and see where we could come in.
And I think just from our perspective, that's totally on the table. I think it's at the point where we're getting down to brass tacks here, and like we have to know what that target is, and then we'll work with all of you at this table to figure out how to get it there. That was just, that 300 to 600 was just based on what we had initially thought and what we were hearing from our cost estimators and what we thought would be, you know, relatively straightforward to achieve. But if we have to go beyond that, then we can find a path.
I'll be honest, we had a meeting yesterday and heard this number. I've been in a funk ever since, to the point that employees have come up to me to ask if I'm okay. Because I have been so concerned about this for the last 24 plus hours. And I'll be honest, these folks feel the same way. I mean, it was evident yesterday that we all it was this like gloom over our Zoom meeting of the reality of this. So it's a very tough pill to swallow.
It's unprecedented. It's really hard to
Well,
swallow.
I think it's really important that people know that back in 2018, it would have been half the cost. I mean, it's not that we have all these fancy bells and whistles. It's not that you guys did a bad job designing this, or, you know, it's construction costs, and I don't think people really realize that.
And to put it in a bit of perspective, I actually just did the square footage costs for West Branch. Rob called me the other day to ask for it, and that is a very, very nice building. That is the high quality materials, stone floors, copper siding, complete gut renovation with, it's got 65-inch TVs in the little meeting rooms, like stuff that we are not proposing here. And that was like $870 square foot. And we finished that in 2020.
Yeah, 20.
And finished, it was funded in 20.
We went to bid in
18,
2019.
2019.
Yeah, we went to bid in 2019 and finished during the
And
pandemic.
we're looking at 1,000.
So are we gonna get to a point where you create something that shows us what we can get for 8.85? I'm not being facetious. I mean, we have to do something. And if we've got some money to spend, we need to talk about what could happen, worst case scenario. The building is not gonna last 5 more years if we don't do anything.
My only concern with that is that we cross into a threshold where Design Lab might need more time and more funds to basically redesign the building, which I don't know that we're, and I'm not gonna speak for you guys, but the amount that we're trying to achieve in savings, and you guys chime in, but can that be done as is currently designed?
If we're trying to get what is now the 9.2 down to what was the 6.5 in direct construction costs, I think that is a big stretch without like major changes, like no community room, no, very limited landscape, just like big bites of the apple. But if we work together to find, like, do we need to get back to the SD number? Is there somewhere in between there and where we are now? Like, whatever that target is, I think we could get to, but getting all the way back to the 6.5,
It's a wholly different
It's
project.
not gonna look like what we've been looking at.
And that 6.5 number came in 2021. And just the construction market has adjusted so significantly since, I mean, even since this, we did the SD estimate, but that 2-year span between, or year and a half between fall of 21, spring of 23. I mean, it's kind of where like the biggest number change is that market adjustment between the concept and the SD, and then and the DD is just number is a bit more on top of that, which is what I mean. I think we're kind of prepared to, I don't want to speak out of turn, but hopefully target the SD number as close as possible, which we had a set estimated at. And then we kind of added some more stuff onto it. So including the electrification, the roof, double height spaces, so.
Sunny, go ahead.
When you say SD number, well, I have another question, but when you say SD number, what number are you referring to? Just for clarity.
That is the
SD middle.
the
So-
8.1
Okay.
construction budget, which is,
And that's the number you said that you could potentially get back to, or?
we don't know, with everything that's been discussed in these meetings, we couldn't like entirely reach that number, we don't think, without making really significant sacrifices, but that's a much more reasonable goal than the 6.5. The 6.5 has other factors that we just cannot
Okay.
really account for.
Well, my next question kind of goes into that, and it kind of goes for what Lisa was saying, like, do you haven't like any idea of roundabouts where you think you could get us? And then that way we would know as far as like the town is concerned, if that's gonna work.
I think you're gonna put everything on the table,
They
right?
want you
I
to
mean,
come up
what
with
we were
something, you want
saying-
them to come up with something.
So I think,
Yeah.
I mean, for the sake of this evening's conversation, we felt comfortable putting this target
Yeah.
on the screen. But there's opportunity to go beyond this, but I wouldn't want to sit here and say that we can get all the way back to that 8.1. I think that'd be doing everybody here a disservice. What we need to do is take all of these ideas and all the feedback that we're getting, that like we really got to look at this really critically. We got to look at it harder than what's on screen here, and then come back to you in a couple weeks on how we could potentially get there. I wouldn't want to put a number forward now.
Right.
Just it wouldn't
And
be
like
fair to you. And
Lisa said, I mean, maybe like the whole reinvigorating the historic entrance, right? So everything is on the table, everything. Whatever you think of, you're
Yeah.
gonna bring to us next meeting, right?
Yeah.
Morgan?
Maybe for the next meeting, and I'm thinking both for my own and others' edification, and also as possibly something to share with the people. Do you think you could put a little box together like the one that's on screen now that shows the biggest drivers of the increase in cost? Because people are going to say, why is it $3 million more? And yes, construction costs can be one of these little things, but like,
yeah, we can do that. I mean, and there's other drivers that you don't see on screen here. These are driving what happened between SD and now, but getting from
Right.
concept to SD, cost escalation is a huge part of all of this, but you know, the whole cistern mist system, that's the considerable added expense that's not here because we were dealing with that at SD, but
right.
that-
So that's actually kind of what I'm getting at, is because like, and again, I get like heated when I see people throwing around bad information online, but I want to say, this is not us trying to have a fancy building. This is us trying to build a building that won't burn down, you know, but that's a hard thing to communicate sometimes from just a random townsperson is what I am. So if we could sort of say, and the bigger increase took place between CD and SD. So having an additional little box to say, these are all these things, or like all the PFA stuff and all these problems that really have nothing to do with the library building itself. And that's what people think of. It would be good to have that, just one, for us to remember why it went up, but also to be able to share. These are the major things that cause the increase. These are the things we're trying to do to, cut back.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, I totally agree with Morgan on that point there. If anybody from town watched the recent Neshoba update for the high school renovation, which is the subtext and all this is happening in, the OPM in that case probably spent 45 minutes just talking about the economic impact of pandemic and escalation, just to put that into context. So I think there's kind of, not to oversimplify it, there are things were added, since SD. And then there's things that just happen in terms of overall escalation, which compounded on top of each other. So it's just providing people that impact. The other thing that they talked about.
We lost you.
And that was, what happens if. Can you hear me?
We lost you for the past like 30 seconds, Andrew.
Okay, I just moved over. So I was just saying, so there's, not to oversimplify it, there is the added scope of, for whatever reasons, which are, just for the safety and functionality of the building. And then there's, just the escalation and putting that into context. And the escalation differs somewhat by trade. So just the square foot cost. So just some simple graphic explaining that to people who haven't been tracking this in construction news for the past 3 years. But also they talked about in the high school presentation, the impact of not moving forward and what happens if you do nothing. So I think kind of contextualizing this of saying,
That's
now
right.
is the time to act, and the time kind of in money already invested in this and losing it. It's not going to get better if you wait.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that was a question I had. Are these costs is this the new normal for costs?
Yes, I
Okay.
mean, that's,
They're not gonna come down.
well, to the best of our knowledge, I mean, we look at the history in public construction and we don't see these costs going down. It may have happened, once or twice over the last several decades. 2009, you might have seen a dip after the Great Recession, but generally speaking, no, this becomes sort of the new normal.
We've heard the same thing. We talked to a lot of estimators across the industry on a lot of different types of projects, and some are suggesting that they may plateau and level out over the next couple of years, but we're not hearing that they're going to be going back down.
Kathleen, real quick.
Yeah, just to clarify a point I think Melissa tried to get to, the new estimate has a 9.1 for construction costs. Was there a new estimate for soft costs? And is there anything that can be saved in the soft cost piece? And what is the awful bottom line now?
We're not making that public. It's actually, I don't want that number out in the public. We can give, that's why it's approximate, because it will really rock this project. So I'd rather not give the current bottom line publicly.
Yeah, the problem there is at some point the town has to approve that number.
No, they don't. If we make cuts, that number's never going forward.
Okay, I hear you.
We
I hear
could,
you.
we could say though,
Fine.
that the soft costs are largely in proportion to the construction costs.
Yeah.
So our focus right now is getting those construction costs down to a more reasonable level and thereby reducing the soft costs, I think. That's fair to say.
Anything
So
else?
renderings with the green metal shelves in them next time?
No, but in all seriousness, getting those coated in a coat of paint and around the perimeter of the new collection, I think we have to be thinking about everything. And I just want to, I said this earlier in the process, but it's a good point to mention it again, that when that concept estimate was done in the fall of 2021, it projected escalation for construction start in spring of 23. Okay, so we are now, at best, we're going to be 9 months beyond that. So we have almost an additional year in escalation, which is, you hear different numbers, but it's anywhere from 6 to potentially 9% per year that costs are escalating. So that, to Morgan's point earlier, like what has driven us from where we were in 21 to where we are now, that is a big component of it. And that
So
delta,
that should go on that slide so that people have all the information.
absolutely, that's why I brought it up. But that's,
Yeah, no, it's really good to know.
hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're like absorbing, for lack of a better term, into our process to try to figure out how to account for.
Well, and I think what Morgan's proposing sounds really good, because even I, like somebody on the building committee, is not totally clear all the time about exactly where money is going and how things are being attributed. And I think there is interest in the town and like why this is happening, and they're just kind of not understanding where it's coming from. And I think also if we could have like a frequently asked questions, like something just so that people, something easy that people can go to that's really easy to understand and they can see those comparisons. But also like what happens if we don't get a new library? Like you're saying 6 to 9% per year increase in costs. Like they also need to know if like this doesn't go through at town meeting, there are consequences to that, and there are very serious consequences. Like Lisa's saying she's not even sure if it'll last another 5 to 10 years. So I think all of that in something that's very easy to understand would be really helpful.
Yeah, we can work. Yeah, we can work together to prepare that.
Thank you.
I'm curious about something. You mentioned that you had two estimators, your own and the outside, and that the number they came to is quite different, and you reconciled it. What did that consist of?
Oh, well.
It was
Hours and hours.
a 4-hour meeting where we went line by line on both.
But was some
estimates.
of them, were there inaccuracies in one of them? I
No,
mean,
so the estimator that I had hired on the town's behalf, this was their first look at the drawings. So I think that accounts for a lot of why they were a little on the high side. So part of the point of doing the reconciliation meeting is to make sure that between the design team, OPM, and both the estimators, they have the most accurate understanding of the project that they can.
So in
So
some
by the
cases,
process
a
of the-
communication issue.
Yeah, it's going back and forth and saying, well, what did you carry here? And, is that the right quantity? And then, it's, so through the process of the meeting, you sort of sharpen the pencils and come to the most accurate number that you can. So,
Okay. Thank you.
One last thing to talk about, if that's okay, to switch gears. We can come back to
Please,
anything,
please
but
do.
it's yet another challenge in our process. I don't know that we ever said that building was easy, but this is particularly challenging. Sorry, we already went over this, but the transformer. So because we're increasing the electrical demand on the building, independent of whether or not we go at 100% electrical or not, we need a new transformer to supply the building. And we have heard, I think we alluded to this in past meetings, that the local utility company was putting forward some really extended lead times of up to 4 years to get a new transformer. They have since confirmed that or sticking to their guns, that is the lead time that they are contending with. So obviously that's like kind of a non-starter, because we're at to wait 4 years before we can get electrical service in the building. Like it just impacts so much more. So it's a big issue that we need to figure out. And I say we collectively, meaning the town and the building committee. But there is, and we need to think sort of outside the box. Oftentimes if it was Eversource or NSTAR, one of the bigger, larger utilities in the state, then more buying power, they can get transformers on site sooner, but we're not in that case. But even still, transformers have long lead times.
I was recently at a seminar, and Eversource was, they don't have them either.
Yeah, it's a dilemma. It's a big issue. So and we're just putting it out there, like that needs to be figured out. And we can certainly assist with that, and our engineering team can assist with that. But one thing that was put forward was, if the town could purchase a transformer directly from a manufacturer and sort of take it out of the going through a utility company, that may be a way to reduce the lead times. We are hearing pretty consistently at least a year and a half, potentially 2 years for this type of equipment. So we haven't, the 4 years, I've said this multiple times, but the jaw kind of hit the floor when we heard that. So that's something that like we all need to come to grips with and figure out. Because if we're waiting for Hudson and Light and Company or Light and Power to bring us a transformer, that may
So
just.
how is it
completely
that the
derail
town
project.
could buy one and Hudson Light and Power can't?
Well, it's different, like, we could put out a public procurement and that we could get them from a wholesaler or someone else. Hudson Light has to go through their distribution center.
Okay,
But I will add, there is a little caveat. If we buy it, we own it, we own any problems with it, we own. Now Hudson Light had said in 4 years that they'd be willing to swap it out. So we're potentially looking to buy a transformer for a couple of years. But if anything were to happen to it in that meantime, then we pay for that cost. They won't then come out and fix it.
got it.
Yeah, I didn't explain that well, but thank you. But that's why we've got kind of 3 categories. Owner, either the utility company owns it, if it breaks, they deal with it, or the town does, and then they have to contend with that. And then there's cost of the project, obviously, if the town purchases it, which is not in these numbers. We're working on getting a number for what that transformer would cost. But the big component that could benefit the project is the reduced lead time.
Have any rough idea of what the transformer costs?
What-
We've asked around, but we're not really
You're not
sure.
comfortable
It-
saying?
I mean, I would say less than 50,000. But there's caveats to this too, like if we do go all electric, that requires a larger electric load and therefore a larger transformer, and that is a variable here. Like we don't know what that difference is. But it's not I hesitate to say anything with cost these days, but I don't think it's a 6-figure issue.
Yeah, that's not what we're seeing so far.
It's a 5-figure issue, hopefully,
Yeah.
50 or less, but I can't say that with any level of confidence.
If we were awarded one of those grants for all electrified projects, could the cost be rolled into that?
Wouldn't be rolled in so much as you would get, get money, you would get payments that would go towards any mechanical system payments that you're making. I'm not explaining this very well, but the grant comes once the contractor is hired and is working and they're submitting requisitions for payment. The grant would be paid in installments. And then that amount that you receive would go towards those specific types of construction costs, those mechanical systems costs. So the grant payments would offset those costs, if that makes any sense.
But if the transformer is necessary.
It's part of that. Well, I think it's dedicated, the grant was intended more for the mechanical system, but I'd have to look into that a little bit more. I mean, in the aggregate, the grant is offsetting costs no matter what, right? So whether it's coming out of the electrical bucket, the mechanical bucket, the plumbing bucket, probably doesn't really matter, but so.
I don't think it makes much difference because I think the additional cost, if I remember, was 700K to go all electric. And the grant was 500K. So I don't think it would.
What was the 700 number?
Yeah, I want to clarify, that is not the cost of going all electric. That is the entire cost of the HVAC, correct?
That's
Oh, is that right?
That's everything.
That's the entire delta.
Yes.
Okay.
700, it went up by 700,000 for a series of reasons, one of which was going all electric, which adds overall adjustments like the air handler becoming
Yeah.
customized.
It's to go 100% electric. I want to be very clear. We do have an electric HVAC system, right? We do not have a 100% electrical. So when we need that supplemental heat, that's this discussion of the gas boiler versus the electric boiler. And that, Frank, we think is a premium of around $50,000.
Oh, okay.
So that's what would get us to the 100% all electric building, which would then make us more eligible for the $500,000 grant.
Make us a better candidate.
And does that
Wouldn't
include
guarantee
the-
it for us, but it makes us a much better candidate for it.
That includes all the electric upgrades too,
It does.
going to the
Yeah,
1,000
we
amp.
reviewed that with the estimator last week. Yep.
What's the cycle of applying for that grant? Do we have to have the building built to
No,
apply? Do
no,
we have
no,
to have
no.
comfort? I mean,
The
'cause-
timing works well. I believe the deadline for this year was in October, so.
and what's the criteria for, like, what do you have to do? Have final plans? Yeah, I mean, like, what threshold do you have to cross to qualify for it? is it just have it all drawn up that you're gonna be all electric?
Yeah, we should have, and again, the timing should work out well. We should have the mechanical specifications in place. We should have cut sheets. They'll want to see the drawings, and we should have all that in the coming months. And there's also an application that they ask that you fill out, and part of that application is hearing about the town's goals for decarbonization. And then on top of that, they're going to want some data that supports what you're going to be saving, what you're paying now or what you're expending in carbon now versus what you're going to be doing in the future. So it's a big package that we'll work with the town to put together. But yeah, it's, again, the timing's going to work out well because of the deadline. So we'll have all of the needed design materials that they would want to see.
And when do they make a decision?
It's a few months afterwards. Okay. It's a few months if I recall correctly. So.
Here's just looking back at the schedule that we highlighted at the top of the meeting. These are our upcoming meetings and milestones. ZBA is in a couple of weeks on the 10th. We are proposing that additional workshop 6.1 is what we're calling it here, on Wednesday evening, the 12th. And the primary purpose of that will be to talk through all the value management strategies with more detail. And then following that, coming out of that meeting and getting to consensus amongst all of us on what it is how it is we're reducing the cost and what it is we're pulling from the scope. We then would update all of our documents to reflect that, and also provide further detail to everything to go to our 50% CD estimate. The Friday, the August 11th is what we're targeting. So that gives us, not quite 4 weeks to get all of that updated and incorporated and developed. And then we have another three-week estimating period. You can see it there. That takes us to the end of August. And then a workshop in early September to review those costs. So that's to stick with the timeline that we already have in place. That's not extending anything. That's kind of working with the milestones that we've already established.
Is there the possibility of getting the materials ahead of the meeting on the 12th? So there's, just to think about them a little bit before we meet.
We will do our damnedest for sure.
I know you're up against a wall, and I'm not trying to be unfair about it.
But we get it. You guys need time to think about it and digest it all. It's hard to make decisions like that in just a couple hours in a meeting like this. So we'll do everything we can to pull together something in advance of that.
It may just be partial, like just the floor plans or something.
Yeah. It's a lot to think about.
One last question. I meant to bring it up when we were looking at the plan diagram, but what's the appetite? It sounds like everything's on the table, but for a reduced capacity in the community room.
I have no problem with that. We don't have a community room right now. A community room is bonus.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll look hard at that, as with everything else that was on that list and others. Okay.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to John and your report.
Well, okay, so the one item I had to bring to the committee, and this goes under the topic of soft costs, and more specifically adding soft costs potentially to the project, which is maybe a sore subject right now. But as we're marching towards the construction documents phase of the project, we typically recommend that we hire a commissioning agent. I had mentioned this at the last meeting. A commissioning agent would be a third-party engineering firm that would be representing the owner and contracted with the town. And they would be doing testing and verification of the mechanical and electrical and plumbing systems of the new building, basically to make sure that they're functioning as the design was intended. So we recommend this on every project. And because of that, I went and I advertised and solicited proposals for commissioning agents this past month. I received a total, I think, of 8, which is a pretty good turnout for proposals for commissioning agents for a project like this. And the lowest, and well, so I'll start by saying that all of the firms that submitted proposals to us for commissioning services are all qualified. They're all known entities in the market, and I don't have any concerns with any of them. So I was looking specifically at the proposed fees and their proposals. So, and I've included this in the packet. I don't know if you have had a chance in the monthly report. I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at it, but the lowest proposal was from BVH Integrated Systems. They're an engineering firm based out of Connecticut. And I know I asked the question, if you guys are out of Connecticut, can you come up to Stowe and service this project easily? And I actually called them to ask the question. And I know BVH because we've worked with them on other projects. I just want to make sure that there's not a geographical issue here because they came in at a relatively low fee. So they said, no, they've got people up in this area that can very easily service the project. So where I'm going with this is BVH came in at a total cost of $24,450 for commissioning that would start, their services would start in construction documents. They would take a look at the CDs and they would do evaluations during construction, and they would also do some post-occupancy work. Once the building's finished, they would be doing testing and monitoring. So I would recommend moving forward with BVH engineers as the town's commissioning agent on the project. If the committee is agreeable to that, then I'd be seeking a motion.
So they do the commission of all HVAC systems?
Yeah, mechanical and electrical.
I'll make a motion to move forward with BVE for the commissioning agent.
BVH.
BVH.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Anybody?
Yes, it's okay.
Lisa.
I'm sorry.
Well, is there any
Oh,
discussion?
oh, sorry. Is there any discussion about that? If not, then I will go for a vote. Yes.
I will vote yes.
Aisha? Yes. Frank?
Yes.
Yes. Denise? Yes. Samantha, yes. And
Morgan.
Morgan?
Yes.
Morgan. That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I make a motion to approve the Collier's invoice for May in the amount of $8,602.80.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Okay. Denise?
Yes.
Sunny?
Yeah.
Frank?
Yes.
Aisha? Lisa?
Yes.
Tina is a yes. Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you.
I make a motion to approve the Design Lab Architects invoice and the amount of $96,835.50 for the 75% design development.
Do I have a second? Thanks, Aisha. Any discussion? Okay, we'll vote. Tina's a yes. Denise?
Yes.
Sunny? Yes. Frank?
Yes.
Aisha? Lisa?
Yes.
Morgan?
Yes.
You?
I make a motion of both committees to approve the minutes of the May 24th, 2023 meeting as presented.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Okay, Tina's a yes. Denise?
Yes.
Sunny? Yes. Frank?
Yes.
Aisha?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Morgan?
Yes.
True.
Still with us?
Yep. He's muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else?
Can I add something to just a clarification on the commissioning agent? So that was something, that expense is something that I had been tracking on the budget, in your original budget of 8.8. So I don't want the committee to think in terms of adding new expenses. It's something we've been anticipating tracking. So I just thought that'd be interesting for an important note.
I have a question about the meeting in 2 weeks. You didn't include the exterior design committee, but won't some of the discussion be about the exterior design?
So we talked about that and we felt, and I mean, you can correct me, that it's really the interior changes that would drive the further discussion about exterior. I mean, if people feel strongly, if you think that the exterior, we can certainly post it that way. But when we talked about this yesterday, the feeling was because the cuts we're looking at are really interior.
Well, I mean, you mentioned like the surface of that second portion of the building in the back and things like that. I mean, I don't know. And then if we were to change the entrance, you know, to not be the main entrance anymore, I think it would affect. I don't know, I just feel like it's all tied together.
I don't personally see any harm in it. It's ultimately up to the building committees on attendees, but I mean, especially if we are considering those big landscape moves, which I think we probably ought to.
Then it'll be a joint meeting. Motion to adjourn at 8:53.
Second.
So.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.